the actual release date?
I guess it would have been, it was delivered Monday.
Okay.
So, and I started shipping them Monday.
Okay.
I had a number of pre-orders and we filled those, and I was still filling them. And
That's exciting.
we're selling it.
Awesome. And so what is this book called? What is it about?
The title is Risk Takers and History Makers, The Story of Leominster. And what it's about is it's a narrative history of the city of Leominster from its incorporation depending on which calendar style you use. The current one, July 4th, 1740, to the present.
Okay. How has the calendar changed between that
In
and
1752, the British went from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar.
Oh.
So if you go by the old style date, because Leominster, of course, was incorporated before 1752, the Leominster's incorporation date, see in books sometimes OS, old style, was June 23rd, 1740.
Interesting.
So on September 2nd, 1752, they moved the calendar ahead to September 13th.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
So 11 days get. So imagine them doing that today, saying, okay, you're going to take 11 days and we're going to fast forward.
Oh my goodness.
And when they did that, Leominster's incorporation date became, ironically, July 4th.
Okay, that is very funny. What good timing.
And that's Mark Bodanza talking about being a historian now instead of a book author.
Well, this one's a history book, so.
So how did you decide to write this particular story?
So, last November, when the cool winds start picking up at that time of the year, I tend to have this cyclical thing where I like to read all summer, but I like to write in the winter.
Oh, yeah.
So writing is almost, it's a hobby in a way for me. And so, on a cold winter night with the fire place lit, I like to write. So I have always got, funny, as an author, you're always getting questions, what's next? As if something has to be next. But typically my process is I have 3 or 4 books in the incubator, I call it, just bubbling around. And one sort of pops up to the surface, and I said, okay, we're going to do that one. And, I didn't have, I had some projects like I always do that I was thinking about, but none of them were quite ready. And I was looking around for something to write, and I happened to be in a Barnes & Noble store. And I was just sort of impressed by the volume of books on the shelves. There are so many books out there. And years ago, people thought, the book industry was dead. And today, more books are published than ever. And I was just looking at the titles and saying, why do people write these things? And obviously to inform, to educate, for a point of view, to entertain. But the other thing I thought about is people write for legacy. Any author that tells you differently, I think, isn't being entirely candid. People write, we're human beings, we're here for a short time. We all want to leave the world a little better than we found it, and at least that should be the goal. So we write for legacy, and I said, what could I write that someone would read 200 years from now? And I said, how about a history of Leominster? Because it really hasn't been done for a long, long time. In 1852, a man named David Wilder wrote a book called The History of Leominster. And it wasn't really a narrative history. It was more of a compartmentalized, I call it, where various topics were addressed. Post offices, lawyers, doctors, politicians, wars that were fought, ministers, churches, were all sort of segregated into various parts of the book and discussed. And very useful, tremendously useful to a local historian, that information. But it wasn't sort of a narrative story. And then there were other books that were written which were sort of biographical, who's, picture books, books very heavy on images and light on text. So you could even make the case that no true narrative history of Leominster has ever been written. Certainly nothing since 1852. So I decided someone's going to do it. So I volunteered, I guess.